Good evening and welcome to another edition of teissTalk with me, your host, Jenny Radcliffe. We have got a great show for you tonight on a topic that I never realised was quite so controversial, which is the topic of playbooks. Do we need them? Do we want them? And how many exactly do we need? It's controversial because I happen to think, well, we'll listen to what I think, but I'm not sure I even like the term playbook. Never mind, think they're of much use. So don't forget, I want to say hello to all our Tuesday teissTalk audience. Hello, everybody. You can contribute to the show. You know, we are your only twice weekly live cyber talk show that you can actually contribute to while we're broadcasting live, and that means you can put your names and any questions or comments in the chat, and the best one receives a teissTalk mug. Mine has been broken on my travels, so if you've got one more than me. We are gonna have a great panel of two guests today. We have Ben Bachman, who is the VP of Group Information Security at Straw, and Kai Helmson, who's the Managing Board Member and Secretary of Twins Foundation. Welcome to both of you, gentlemen.
Hi, nice to be here.
So, lovely to have you both on the show. And we're going to talk today about playbooks, but first we're going to have a look at this little article, which is only a short article, and it does mention playbooks, and it just brings a few questions. So I thought we'd look at it and see what you think. So our article today is about the recent ransomware leak in Tata Power. Data was stolen. The article was in InfoSec magazine. Data was stolen from Tata, and there's various machinations about whether they're going to get it back and whether they got all of it back and this type of thing. But the thing that links it to our theme today of playbooks is a quote by Edward Liebig, who's the global director at Hexagon. And he commented in the article because what he said was, it said that they didn't know whether they paid the ransom because there was still some issues and things. But what he said was, he said some cyber insurers prohibit the payment of a ransom, which means the ransomware incident response playbook must have a very defined and comprehensive declaration and approval process that goes to the top of the executive team. I'm just interested in what you guys have to say about that, because I suppose what it's really pointing to is that most playbooks don't include, or maybe didn't include in the past, the fact that we might not be able to pay altogether. Let's go to Ben first. Ben, what's your view on that? Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Well, actually, I think that's quite difficult because it might really depend on your company and where you're sitting at the moment. I'm not a fan of that quote because I would not go that deeply in my I don't know. I think it's too much detail for a playbook.
Yeah.
And I'm not a fan of that detailed playbooks because maybe then you need one for ransomware group 1, ransomware group 2, 3, whatsoever, because they all kind of act the same but different as well.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that, Kai, as well. You know, it's like how, you know, the theme of the show is, you know, how many playbooks do we need? But you kind of need a general one and then one for specific situations. You're on mute, by the way, but I wondered what your thought was.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting piece here is, I mean, it's a lot of speculation in the article, right? They don't really know what happened. And I would say, even if it was included in the playbook, doesn't mean that they would have done it according to the playbook, right? Because the playbook is only as good as they put it into practice. I think the one thing that is interesting, though, and I think it does belong into the playbook, is what's the escalation process, right? So how do you escalate it upwards? At what point in time which kind of incident do you escalate, right? What's the margin? So that I find very interesting. So for the case that it does have a business impact, which apparently here it did, the business owners are already involved. So that for me is an element that should somehow be in a playbook at the right level. So there I agree fully with you, Benjamin. It needs to be defined at what level and how do you escalate and what is the process behind. And then you not only do this if there's a ransomware to be paid, but if at the moment it has business impact, I think a good playbook also includes pulling in the business side of things. And that's what I read from out of this quote, at least if I read into it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, he was saying these are business level decisions, right to the top of the tree, I guess. And it's difficult because I suppose as well, if your playbook says, we're going to pay if it's under a certain level, we're going to pay if it's easier, because there's that cost benefit analysis. Is it just easier just to pay and get us back up and running and what's been taken? Then the playbook's got to reflect that, and maybe it doesn't, and so really it's I guess it brings us on to the whole topic, doesn't it? And we are talking today about playbooks in general, and what use they are or not. Is my view on it. I mean, I said in the introduction, and I'll come to you first, Ben, but I don't like this term playbook. It's overused. I feel as if it's not really fit for purpose. What's your view on the general term playbook and how they're used?
Well, actually, I don't like it as well, because in my opinion, a playbook should be some very detailed and tell me just make 2 steps to the left, then turn to the right, go, 10 meters straight, whatsoever. And that's not working for what we're talking about. I cannot really have that detailed description of how I will react to something that I don't know what will happen.
Yeah.
So I don't like it as well.
No. How about you, Kai? I mean, I guess are we just semantics? Are we just playing with the word now?
Yeah. Well, obviously it's a little bit a linguistic thing. I think in my understanding, this whole word playbook comes from sports, right? Where you have a playbook and it lists certain plays or strategies, if you will. And of course, there's a lot of discussion before a match, and you establish your playbook. Of course, that only works if the team is set up in the right way, right? They all know what they have to do, right? That's a topic. And then comes the match, and that might be totally different, because guess what? The other team also has a playbook, right? And you don't know which game they're playing before you play them, right? So in that sense, I think it's good to be prepared. If that is what you mean with a playbook, then I would say absolute yes. The term, however, is, and I agree with you fully, Benjamin. For me, it sounds like it is absolutely prescriptive, which it can never be. Because our discipline or the attacks, I mean, they look alike, but they're all very different, right? Even if I go back to the quote, they need a decision process to if they pay the ransom, yes or no. That's even too simple, because how do they pay the ransom? In which country are they located? Are they even allowed to? I mean, the quote even starts with some insurers prohibit that. It's not only insurers, it's also authorities that might not have an interest that happens, or in what form will the ransom be paid, all of that. There's so many different variations of that whole play. If that's a play, that play can look very, very different. I don't think you can be prescriptive there, but you need to think about it. And what are the processes? What are the people I want to pull in? And if that's what we mean with the playbook, yes, then I'd rather be prepared than think about, okay, what do we need to do now? How do we even play the game when it's already too late? So in that sense, I'm a little bit in between. Yes, be prepared, but don't do it too prescriptive, because reality will probably prove you wrong.
Ben, anything to add?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm with you with preparation, but I don't think that the playbook is a proper preparation. What you need more is to define who are your crisis teams or units, and try to carry out crisis team exercises on a regular basis. System simulations, on paper, on a bit more interactive way. And I think that's way more preparation than having a playbook.
Yeah.
You need to know who to call if there's an issue, but those people need to know how to react, who to involve, what to do, and they need to get some intuitive feelings on what to do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Sorry, Kai, go on, please.
Yeah, if I may, going back to the analogy with sports, I mean, probably no one on earth has ever learned to swim by reading a book, right? You need to somehow practice, you need to get together, you need to know how a team works and all these kind of things. So the practice analogy, I think, holds the same in sports, right? The playbook is nice to have, but doesn't make you good at anything. If you don't practice, if you don't build a team, if you don't have the right players on the team, right? How do you put together the folks is so important. So all of that, I think, is more important than the playbook as such. Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose most of the time people aren't saying, look, we're going to get it. And I'm being very critical, but most of the time, I suppose people aren't saying, we've got a playbook. That's what we do. We don't deviate. It's everything covered. So, I mean, I'm being a bit harsh, but I was interested in what you said, Kai, and it kind of ties it with some of the comments coming up in the chat. One from Alan, who's a friend of the show. It says that the playbook, as you say, is a US one, stolen from American football, that describes pre-scripted actions in response to a given scenario. But what you said really caught my ear, because you said, but the other team has a playbook as well. And that's one of the things, is even if we had the perfect playbook that everybody adopted, there's a danger in that, isn't there? Because if I know just from some of the work I do, if you have a predictable adversary, and we are the ransomware or the hackers or the cyber criminals adversary, if you know what they're going to do, that makes you vulnerable too, right? I mean, that makes them vulnerable. I mean, if we follow exactly what's in, if there was a defined form, that predictability even is a problem, right?
Yeah, and what are you going to do if there's something new and you don't have planned for that? You don't have a playbook which exactly describes that new, I don't know, attack or form of that. So actually, I need people that can think, and not that just can do checklists.
If you need people that can think, you're a dreamer, Ben, in this world. You're a dreamer.
Yeah, so I am.
But no, I do think it's important, though, that, one of the points there, and I think I brought it up and Alan's brought it up in the chat as well, is the idea that this is not just about security.
Mm-hmm.
It's a plan. It's instant response in addition to business continuity. And it's a plan of who we call, who we speak to. And I think Kai said as well, and how we escalate. And I just wondered, have either of you got experience of using, a good, we're going to call it a playbook, but a good kind of plan that sort of takes that into account? If in doubt here, these are the people we go to. If this happens, we go here. It's a plan, but it's not prescriptive, as Ben says. Have either of you got experience of a good playbook? Ben saying no.
Not for incident response or something like that. I know good playbooks to set up a new PC or to handle your issues. Things that I can describe.
Kai?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it depends a little bit on the level, but yes, I've seen good examples of a properly defined incident response process, including the business continuity side of things, and also defined processes on, okay, who's talking to whom, and when do you escalate, for example, and how do you involve the business? And if you involve the business, who on the business side is to be involved, right? So also there, you might go through the cybersecurity organization, and then they escalate within a business unit or within a regional company. That, I think, in large and in complex corporations, you have to have defined, because you don't want people who think and can use their valuable time to anticipate what the next step of the attacker is. You don't want them to think, oh, whom do I have to call now within my own organization, right? And
right.
The bigger the organization, the more complex this can be. And you don't want to call someone in the business unit, for example, who don't have a clue about cybersecurity or who don't know what an incident is in the first place. So I think that, in terms of, okay, if that is a play, I do want to have that defined before something happens, right? These communication channels, and how does that work? Whom on the communication side do you involve, right? Who's one? Whom do you even call to get a crisis communication team together? If that's not defined, people will spend valuable time on useless things, and that is in the corporate directory, find out whom they need to call in the first place.
That's kind of like that minimizing the sort of the human decision making that, if it's unnecessary and we can define it. I love that idea of kind of covering everything that we can cover, so that the brain power and the kind of bandwidth is taken up on the bigger decisions. I see in the chat that we do have Jacqueline in the chat, who's from NTN Ghana, and she was going to be on our panel today, but we had a couple of issues with connections. But because she's commented, and I'm going to kind of speak to you, Jacqueline, just through the chat, because I'm assuming you can hear me. But she gives a different opinion here. She says, I like playbooks. Sorry. And think it should be part of the bigger instant response plan. It's basically a checklist, and they're useful anywhere. And that is true. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? That's what we're saying. It's not so much what a playbook, it's not that it's the answer to everything, but that checklist, did we do everything? That is a useful thing. And I think that was what you were saying as well, Kai.
Yeah.
No, please.
And absolutely. So in that sense, I think if you think about, it's kind of planning a little bit what could happen, right? Of course, it cannot be prescriptive, because I think the attacks are too different. Ransomware is just one of the possibilities, but it needs to be well rehearsed, right? So at best, you don't have an incident response team that says, "Oh, I need to call this Mr. or Mrs. X and Y," and they've never talked, right? At best, they have been through this, they have done this, not in an incident, but maybe in a practice, maybe in a rehearsal. Maybe they get together because there's a certain form of community building, right? Or they're sitting in the same trainings also. So that is something that I would like to see in place. And then I think you can have a highly effective incident response, because they're focusing on really responding, right, to the incident and containing it and getting the right folks together, rather than working their way through the organization that they're part of.
Yeah. I guess, Ben, some things are always going to be the same, as in who makes the decision ultimately, whether we pay, whether we don't, who talks to the lawyers, who talks to the press.
Yeah.
I suppose what we're talking about now is, how do we introduce the flexibility that this evolving problem is going to introduce? How do we kind of introduce that to a document that, by, as Jacqueline has said, has to be in some ways a checklist? So what do we do with the flexibility? How might we make these better, I guess?
Well, actually, the checklist part is the part of, have you, I don't know, taken a talk to the communications department? Have you involved the lawyer? Have you did that and that and that? Which is the same one for each incident, probably, or each larger one. And I think the more important part from my point of view is team exercises. Really regularly. Just exercise. Do know who your crisis team is and train them with different scenarios. So they get a feeling about, how could ransomware look like? How could something like that look like?
Yeah, what's the worst case?
And actually, so they get a feeling on, who should I call? Who should I not call? It's good if they can have a look into a checklist, but it's even better if they don't have to look into that, because they already are trained that it's working like that. So
yeah. So it becomes muscle memory. Let's go to some of these comments, because some of these comments are really great. So we've got Raza saying, I really like Benjamin's point in being too prescriptive list of considerations. Should be there, helpful being able to direct the team to think in the when, considering course of action to take. Have quarterly sessions, and this is coming up over and over again. We've got Alan saying, playbook should be regarded as a starter for 10, guidance, not prescriptive. They do say to aid consistency, prompt standard actions, and ensure things are considered better than a blank piece of paper. I think as well, we've got Carl, regular reviews are absolutely essential, because things constantly change. This is, it seems to me that, we have the same kind of view in it, that reliance on these things is never a good thing, but that checklist is a good thing. So why do you think we are so kind of caught up with this terminology in this industry? I hear this over and over again, playbook, playbook, playbook. Do we think it's like we're optimistic? We want to be able to say, this is the manual. This is the manual for when we're attacked, Kai, what do you think about that? Do you think that we wish there was a playbook that told us everything?
Yeah, I mean, it could be us and top management and everyone else seeking some form of security, in the sense of, it would be so nice to have everything written down and, and it's lined out and we can't do it wrong. But that's probably that's certainly not how it works, right? You can have a lot of standard procedures. I mean, large organizations, that's what they do. They build organizations, they define processes, and then they try to adhere to these or circulars, and they try to adhere to it. So it's kind of what normal organizations do, right? And of course, I'm not surprised they also want to put it on something like security. I think there are a lot of things to be standardized in cybersecurity. That's for sure. They need to be standardized because you cannot have targeted and individual processes every time something goes on in cybersecurity, right?
Right.
It's just too large. So it's kind of the balance between how much can you standardize things versus where do you need individual answers to things. So I think that's where the fascination with playbooks comes from. And then I think they just took, and there was also a comment in the chat that in the military you would call this standard operating procedures, which is super interesting. Sounds very different, of course. It's more military jargon, right? But I would agree. Probably it's the same. I haven't been to the military, and then the playbook sounds kind of sportive and maybe it's an easier language to digest to a lot of people, I think that's where the fascination comes from.
Well, we've got a couple of things. We've got Jacqueline again and again. Hi, Jacqueline. Thanks so much for contributing to the chat. So she can't be live on our panel today. We really wanted you on the show. But Jacqueline says she definitely can't have a playbook for every scenario, but I would create playbooks on my worst fears. A playbook on raising kids would be nice. Well, we all know that, right? But I do see it. There's a great comment here as well from Hendrik. The chat's great today, guys, and really appreciating all these comments. And Hendrik says, the number of not regularly updated crisis communication plans is huge, as I see when I'm auditing. And that's the thing, I think, that's the problem, isn't it? We're talking about, Ben, you've said these exercises are more important. One of the most important things is to make sure everything's always up to date, right? And that's the playbook we need.
Well, actually, I think the fascination is coming, in my mind, from one point. If I have a playbook, I can show it to you and tell you I'm prepared. I have planned for everything. It may not be used. No one actually knows what's in there. No one trained that. Maybe the people that are nominated in the playbook as the, incident handler, the guy from marketing, whatsoever, don't even know about that. But I can show it to you. And they'll throw it to you and tell you, hey, I've been prepared. And I think that's one of the things why we have that. It's some cover your ass bullshit.
It is. I don't disagree. Don't make me laugh. I've got this terrible cough. I picked it up in the Arctic, just saying. Yeah, I mean, I think we've got people saying it's seen as a tick box, but I think that point that you've just raised, Ben, is clever, and I think this is one of the things why this has become so popular is because we have to sell as security preparedness to the board, to the C-suite, to the rest of the C-suite, hopefully, and this is something that we can say, look, this shows you. And Alan said here, it's comforting to be able to reach for the Bible, but then you need to be agile. I mean, what do you think about that, Kai? That's partly the popularity, isn't it? It's our job to say this. Look, we are prepared, so this is as prepared as we can be.
Yeah, and maybe the very act of writing a playbook or updating it already forces you to think about scenarios, right? You need to think this through. A lot of organizations are fortunate enough to not always have these big incidents, right? That's also something to be prepared for. It's not like they can train real life every day on things. So you need to kind of make them think and rethink certain things. And one thing that only comes to my mind now, and I haven't thought about it before I went into this call, but when I was younger, I was working in rescue service, in ambulance, right? And there you also have a certain form of playbook. And there are certain things you start with, right? It's kind of the first minutes or 3 minutes or so. If you get to an accident, you get to an emergency, there's a standard procedure, so to say. What you're checking, right? You start with the most important, but you would wonder how many people get that wrong, right? Is that person still breathing? I mean, that's what you start with. No discussion. Or are they still, do they have a heartbeat? And that is something that works on something as complex as the human body. So I think probably something like that needs to be in a playbook. So where do you start? What's the first 3 things you're doing? And then, of course, you need to be agile, because then everything looks different. So it doesn't have to be playbook from A to Z, but it can be at least giving you some heuristics, okay, this is how you start, right? Or this is standard operating procedure. And then, of course, everything else unfolds. But there was a comment there, and I think it is a good one. It helps you to stay calm and not forget about the most important things. And because sometimes people go into this state of chaos, right? And they forget about the most important things, because they're already into a solution, right? They're already they go into solution or solving mode, and they forget about the most basic things. And that is what a playbook can do. I think that can be very valuable.
And the ones, sorry, Ben, go on. No, please.
Sorry, we are used to that kind of playbooks, I'd say, in terms of emergencies. So who do we call? What do we tell the people? How many people are affected? And I'm with you. A playbook on that kind of level is what we need. And we implemented that group-wide at our site for cyber incidents. So we have next to the printers some sort of, or we are planning to have them, some posters on what could be a cyber incident? Where do I have to report it, or who should I inform? What are the questions that guys need to be to know? So what should I answer? And I think that's quite comprehensive playbook, because it covers everything that can be covered on a static level for each incident.
Yeah, and I mean, I've written, operating procedures for security incidents and for negotiations and things, and it's mostly like yes/no gates, really. So if this, go to this, including uncertainty, right? It goes to uncertainty. This is who we go to. We're seeing some really interesting comments. I mean, the chat's great tonight, guys. I really, really like it. Got Jacqueline saying simulated religiously, tabletop, real life. But there's a very interesting question come up from Alison, who says, who should be the playbook owner? Now, this is really interesting, because this pushes the discussion out wider than security. And this is partly what that little article was saying, wasn't it? Is it really security team that should own this? So this is, let's call it the response document, right? The SOP, whatever we want to call it. This is the Bible for when we get hit by an incident, or when there's something like this happens and it's major. Is it really down to security to control all of that, or are we going to be too busy? Should we be focused on the technical side rather than the comms? Who do we think should own this in terms of document control and administration throughout the org? Who do we think should own it?
I do think, because the very exercise of fighting a response needs to be super collaborative. I would like to see the document also being a collaborative effort. So you need to, in writing a such document or standard procedure, you need to involve the teams, because who else is going to, if you don't have communication involved, if you don't have government affairs, for example, these folks probably often forgotten. You need the business side of things involved, and so forth, right? And then, of course, cybersecurity. But ultimate ownership, somebody needs to own the document, right? Have the master document or so. I would still see with actually with cybersecurity incident response. Yes, I would think so. At least that's the experience I have. But then it needs to be a collaborative effort in any case, because else they're writing. Well, as people are not the people that have to do it are not part of the game when it's defined. But I see, Benjamin, you disagree at least with me saying it should be owned, or the template master document should be owned by cybersecurity.
Yeah, well, actually, I think there needs to be an owner as the Highlander principle, and I don't think it should be owned by cybersecurity. Even it should be owned by business continuity management or crisis management if you have something like that, because we don't only have cybersecurity incidents. We will have other crises as well, and probably those playbooks could be, not the same, but very similar to each other, or should be the same. So in my mind, it should be the crisis manager in my company, if I have one, or the business continuity manager.
I mean, if you've got one, I think that's the point, isn't it? It's if the business is of a size where you've got a business continuity manager, then this is their area, surely. And we kind of contribute from a technical perspective and inform that discussion. I think you're both right. I think you agree. This is collaborative. But I've worked with, with some superb business continuity people who were far better than I would ever be, or the people who kind of own the problem are in those types of crises, And I guess we have to own it in a certain. I suppose it's a shift in responsibility in certain cases, really, isn't it? It's like, well, it's kind of your problem, but the business handles how we kind of deal with the lawyers and deal with the money and everything else. A couple more comments in the chat. You've got Christine saying, and this comment's great because I've seen this one very well, is train the people to adapt plans to real scenarios, ask them to think in alternatives and possibilities. I think this is what we're coming to. We're saying this is a collaborative effort. We're going to contribute on the technical side. But when we're running those tabletop exercises, when we're running the simulations, I found when I've run those on social engineering attacks, it's other departments that come up with the fresh thinking because we're just so in it every day. So I thought that was a great comment there from Christine. And Jacqueline again, the workshops evaluate how helpful they really are in a simulated attack environment. You can then work on streaming the playbook so they enhance your resilience posture, which is a very good point. Let's just look at the best person for the job is a willing volunteer. That's Alan saying. Volunteering yourself there, Alan, tonight. It's a working document for the CSERT who will be running it in the event of an incident, a cross-functional team. So that's Jacqueline agreeing with yourself, Kai. Carl saying it needs to be multidisciplinary. I can't speak tonight with this, girls. Multidisciplinary crisis management team. But Alison's come back and she said, I thought that it needs an ultimate owner of a director, but the person who implements and coordinates will be the incident manager. My concern is that if it is owned by the cyber side, it becomes something that's not invested in by the C-suite. Now, I would say that that's true. I think one of the things cyber we have a habit of doing is kind of keeping everything to ourselves. If we're not careful, we have our own language. And, do you think that might be an issue, Benjamin, that if cyber owned it, because you said yourself, there's people who might be better owning it. If we own it, maybe it comes part of the kind of fear, uncertainty, doubt that we seem to have to communicate so often to the board. Maybe that's an issue too.
Well, I don't really know because I often communicate to the board, and I own BCM as well, but I should probably not own that. Because there are a lot of crisis stuff that is owned by HR or other departments. So I really go with the point that it should be some interdisciplinary team. And then in my mind, there needs to be a business continuity manager. And that's just a role. That could be me, that could be the CEO, that could be someone. But there needs to be someone with, some sort of director position who can make calls that owns that.
Yeah, and depends on the scale of it and which information is affected and which data is affected, doesn't it? Kind of to a certain extent, I suppose. It's an interesting one, and it's definitely a topic that's continuing to evolve. As we see more and more of these sort of incidents on a more regular basis, I say. I mean, Kai, let's just kind of, we're sort of coming towards the end of the discussion, really. But, you know, where do you see this going forward? You know, the attacks aren't finishing. They're changing, they're evolving. How do we prepare businesses properly for this type of thing going forward? We've had some great ideas and conversation tonight, but what sort of things might you do as a going forward to advise people on this?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that it came down to questions that are more about the cybersecurity discipline as such, or the organization or the team within an organization, than about the playbook, right? Because that question is, who owns it? Who should work together there? How do we do this? I mean, these are general, let's say, very deep generally deep questions we have for cybersecurity as such. Of course, I believe, but you're asking somebody who works in cybersecurity, it needs to be owned on the C level, right? You should have the right level of ownership. You need the right strategies, and then you mirror that in the organization. You know, that's, at least if you ask me, that's how it starts. I think the idea of a playbook, we had that earlier, is good in the sense of it hopefully asks the right question. It brings together the people, it brings together the businesses and all the other disciplines you need for a proper crisis, right? For a proper cybersecurity crisis. And if that's something that a playbook can do, then I think we'll see more of that. Back to the initial question, do we need more than one playbook? I don't really have an answer to this because what's a fair number there? But I do think we need, if anything, we need a playbook that is evolving, that's been trained on, that is evolving just as the discipline of cybersecurity is evolving and just as the attackers are evolving.
Excellent point. Yeah.
I think your biggest vulnerability could be to just say, we're done, but let's stand still. We're not evolving any further. That is probably the one thing, the biggest vulnerability you can have in an organization. Right?
Yeah, it's to stand still, right? Ben, what about you? What do you agree with Kai? What do you see going forward?
No, actually, I agree with Kai. So we need some sort of strategy on that. I disagree on that cyber should be the owner, but we already have that. I agree
instant manager, though, like that's the thing. If it's a cyber incident with an instant manager, but maybe
that might be the case. Yeah,
I think it's all semantics, right?
And we need to have someone from the C-level involved as well, but I don't think that we will find a CEO, COO whatsoever who will say, I'm the crisis manager. They have other things to take care of, and they won't be able to be part of that trainings and simulations and stuff like that every now and then. They can be part of that, and they might be the ultimate decision maker or the one with the budget, but I don't think that they are the owner of the process and the crisis management team. Well, they are the sponsor.
Yeah, exactly. Well, do you know what? I love this topic. This is one of my favorite topics. I really love to talk about it. And I want to say thanks to my lovely panel today. But I'm just going to go, before I say thank you to everyone, Jacqueline, who was meant to be on our panel and has been on our panel, demonstrating supreme adaptability to any circumstances. She said this should be part of a larger strategy whereby your organization develops a clear understanding of its cybersecurity risk profile, including any key vulnerabilities or touch points that could be susceptible to an attack. And I think between the three of you, even though Jacqueline was only typing those comments, it's been an amazing discussion. So I want to say thank you very much to Ben Bachman, to Kai Hemsen, and to Jacqueline Hansen. I'll give it to Jacqueline Hansen-Kotai, who has been brilliant on the chat and who wins tonight's teissTalk mug because of the many brilliant comments. For someone to adapt like that and take part in the discussion anyway was awesome. I want to thank my lovely teissTalk audience. You were brilliant tonight, Tuesday teissTalkers. What a great discussion. And also point you to the next episode from Jeff White on the 17th of November at 1600 UK, which is about what can the arms race with the attackers teach us. But for now, thanks to the teissTalk team and to everyone listening. Thanks again to the panel. And thanks. I've been Jenny. Goodbye.